Too many families are forced to face the unthinkable, the death of a child. And from that horrific ground zero of loss, the shockwaves spread. Keeping your marriage together at that point, keeping your life together, seems impossible. But it is possible, and there is hope.
This is Signs of the Times Radio with Kent Kingston.
Well, we've got a pretty tough topic to deal with today, but fortunately we've got someone pretty fun to deal with it together with, and that is Trafford Fisher. How are you, Trafford?
I'm very well, Kent.
It's great to have you back in the studio. Now, Trafford is a family life educator who works for the Seventh-day Adventist Church, covering the whole South Pacific region. I guess that must involve a fair bit of travel, Trafford.
Yeah, it does a bit, but it's exciting. It's all of Australia, New Zealand and the major Pacific Islands, Fiji, Tonga, Samoa, Vanuatu. It's just a lovely area to work. I'm very fortunate.
Wow, I'm picturing drinking something out of a hollowed out pineapple with an umbrella. Is there much of that going on?
No, if only that would be lovely. I remember the Cook Islands just look beautiful. They're all fabulous islands. No, usually we go out there, we're doing workshops and seminars and teaching. So we don't always get a chance to look around, but the small bit we have, it is fabulous.
No, that's excellent. Now, as I just mentioned, Trafford, we are looking at a pretty tough topic today, and that is, I guess, a lot of parents' worst fear. It'd have to rank right up there, and that is the death of a child. It's a horrific thing, isn't it? And I imagine you've had contact with families going through that?
Yes, I have, Ken, and you're right. You're right. It's just a horrible thing. It's a huge loss for any parents when they have to say goodbye to a child. It's just beyond belief sometimes for couples to deal with that incredible tragedy. Yes, it is. It's just a really big issue.
Wow. And you mentioned couples, but I've actually heard that for siblings it's incredibly difficult. I've actually heard it said that the death of a sibling for a child is actually more traumatic and has a longer lasting effect than the death of a parent. Have you heard that?
No, I haven't as such, but it doesn't surprise me, Ken. When kids are really close and siblings are really close, to lose that, and I have. When I think about twins, I know for twins, it's particularly significant. But you're right. Any loss for a close family, particularly, is just a massive issue.
I mean, look, grief and loss is difficult at the best of times, but when it comes to the impact of losing a child on the parents in particular, because that's what we're going to be focusing on for the next 25 minutes or so. What's the impact on a family?
Ken, there's so much happening. I think of a mum who, a dad of course, but a mum who carries a baby almost to full term, and then for unknown reasons the baby doesn't make it. To have all those dreams shattered, a mum and a dad can picture their little baby. Sometimes they know the gender, of course, but they have a dream of this baby's going to, they'll watch this baby grow and learn to ride a bike and go to school and establish friends and high school and university. That life dream of what this baby is going to become as an adult, it's all gone. Just like that. And to lose that, not only do you lose the physical baby, if we can say that, but all the dreams and ambitions and hopes that you had for that little child, it just changed dramatically. So it's a huge thing. It's kind of like a lifetime thing. You and I lose something, we lose our keys. It's just so different. When we lose a child, it's just a lifelong thing. So it has huge impacts. And I think one of the key things, of course, is the emotions that it raises. The research suggests there's quite a breadth of emotional responses to the loss of a child. Of course, there's all the shock, And again, let's be open and honest. And sort of a baby may die of illness, or sadly an accident, a car accident. Just reading recently of a family who had to grieve the loss of their little baby that was sadly and overwhelmingly run down by the father in the driveway. He just didn't see the little baby. The shock, the sadness. There's a lot of guilt when a baby or a child dies.
Always asking your questions.
Yeah.
Questions. Could I have done different? Should I have done something different? Whose fault was it? Who do I blame? And that can certainly be a part of the grieving process, isn't it?
It
like
is.
Seeking for reasons.
Exactly. Looking for, and understandably, looking for reasons, and the guilt, it can be overwhelming. A lot of regret associated with that. We should have done this. There's a lot of shoulds. We should have done this. We should have done that. We should have done more of that. A lot of anger, which of course is a secondary emotion after fear and loss, and we get angry, we get frustrated. A lot of resentment. And just all of those emotions are fluctuating all the time. And I think we need to encourage parents who do sadly face this situation to embrace their emotions, not deny them or ignore them, just say, hey, this is real. I'm angry just now, I'm sad. All those emotions are real and to be embraced as much as possible. They can be scary, especially anger and all that fear, but it's all part of that process of the way we react to a loss.
Sure.
So in that regard, Ken, I think we need to throw out the timetable.
Right, yeah.
Is there a timetable? Look, I don't think so. Every person will deal with this uniquely and differently. And I think to have a timetable, look, by next month I'll be here in the month. No, that doesn't work. And we can feel as if we're, what's that little saying, 3 steps forward, 2 back. Emotionally we'll be in a turmoil. And I don't think there's a set timetable at all.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that, Trafford, that, if everyone grieves differently, because, sometimes we talk about in relationships, we talk about love languages. Everyone has a different love language, a way that they, understand and receive and prefer to give love. Is it a similar thing when it comes to grieving? Do people have different, grieving mechanisms, different grieving languages? And I guess if we think about a couple in particular, what happens when those grieving styles don't necessarily match up too well? One of them wants to withdraw, the other one wants to, talk it through constantly, for example.
Yeah, spot on, Ken. I think that's very true. Generally speaking, men, and I know it's generalisation, men will tend to lock down and go quiet. We tend to think inside our heads, so we resolve issues by processing it internally. We don't talk about it a lot, and the real risk here for men, I think, and again, a generalisation, but men are at risk for shutting down and dealing with their grief internally by themselves. And whereas a woman might be more open, she'll cry. It's culturally and socially it's okay for a woman to cry and not so much a man. We're getting better at that, but that whole issue of how do we express our emotions, how do we share them? And you're right, when there's a difference, couples will really need to work at recognising we grieve differently, and that's okay. Not right or wrong, just different. And I think we need to take that right and wrong. I'm grieving the right way, you're not grieving enough, or you're not grieving the right way. It'd be really important for couples to say, okay, look, we do this differently. It's not right, not wrong, just different, and not punish each other for that, but stay in touch and recognise, hey, we do this differently. Yeah.
So, I imagine there must be an impact on a lot of relationships when a child is lost. Is it the case that divorce rates increase due to the death of a child?
It's interesting, Kent, that I'm going to call it a theory. Not sure where it emerged, but there's this belief, maybe more than theory, belief that couples who lose a child will have a far greater chance of divorcing. There's been some recent articles to suggest otherwise. And in fact,
really?
they suggest that 12 to 16% of couples who lose a child divorce. But when they asked the couples who divorced about that, about roughly 40% said it was the loss of the child that led to the divorce. So well over half are saying, no, it wasn't the loss of a child, it was other factors. So I think that's encouraging. Not that we want any percentage of divorce, but it's encouraging to know that we can have some optimism in this, that it's not a given that, a couple lose a child in some way, they're pretty well going to divorce. No, not the case at all. And I think we need to grab that, and that's good news.
Yeah, fair enough, Trafford. But I think, common sense would tell us that if you're in the middle of going through grief, and as we've been saying, possibly, with different grieving styles, that is going to put strain on a relationship, surely. Surely the same level of openness and intimacy and let's have a good time together and, all that sort of stuff is going to be, challenged or threatened in some way by the whole grieving experience.
No question, Kent. And I think again, if couples can recognise that that's going to be a part of the process, so even sleeping, eating, doing all the usual things they do. For some couples, they share that for a fair while, it's about survival. Mm-hmm. They do everything just simply to survive. They are so emotionally turmoil, physically reaction. They feel ill. They don't feel like eating. They don't feel like sleeping. They walk around at night time. And it takes some courage and commitment to say, I need to sustain myself and our relationship in this journey. Let's journey together. What are we going to do to take care of each other? How are we going to deal with these times? And, even work, as I think about it, Kent, some couples will take time off from work to deal with their time of sadness. And often workplaces, of course, have a bereavement policy, can be very, very supportive at this time. Take time off work. Others, and again, I'm thinking possibly men more than ladies, but will go back to work and dive into their work as a way of dealing with that grief and commit heavily to their work. But again, there's some research that suggests that couples who are grieving, people who are grieving, aren't that effective at work, understandably. So they're encouraged, hey, take time off, especially, whether it might be in construction, so where you're at high risk, when you're not concentrating, take time out and just learn to deal with the fact that you are in grief, you are in a time of huge loss, your body, mind reactions are all, over the place. Look after yourself. So it's about self-care.
Yeah. And I imagine, Trafford, that if you're a person of faith, the loss of the child is going to be a real challenge to your religious beliefs, to your sense of a loving God, of there being a sense of purpose in your life. You're asking these questions, why, believing that there is supposed to be a grand plan, believing that there's supposed to be a loving God. This must really throw things into disarray spiritually.
Oh, no question, Ken. In fact, I was reading an article recently where a guy expressed exactly that he had this sort of general belief that, if he lived well and did well and cared for his children as best as he could, then everything would go really well. And when this child died, it was a car accident, it just threw everything to bits. His whole belief system was just shaken. And he admitted it was an incredible challenge for him to hang on to the faith that he had, but he admitted he had to rebuild and just add in some other components to the story, some other jigsaw pieces, if you like, because he recognised that, that belief most probably wasn't entirely real. So you're right, God can get a huge kick at a time like this. And again, we need to understand that, and when we may have friends or even family who have a strong faith but express a real disappointment in God, anger with God, resentment at God, we don't punish them for that. We don't berate them for that. We put our arms around them, hug them and say, hey, let's journey together here, because it's just such a huge thing. So you're right. And
God can take it, Trafford.
He can cope with that. He can cope with a lot of anger and hurt. But it highlights, Ken, when it may be as friends, we do need to be sensitive to what we say. Family members and friends, when someone's going through grief and loss, we really need to be sensitive to just offering nice words and platitudes. We think we're comforting them, and sometimes we say words that comforts us, but it's insensitive to them. So it takes real good wisdom. And I remember somewhere, Ken, an article where it talked about people of faith who have good friends, but those friends are a little insensitive in that issue, and they're saying things like, come on, it's time to get over you. You haven't got enough faith in God. You need to believe more in God. We need to set some boundaries around those friends, because that can be very draining. And we
destructive,
need...
really.
Yeah, it is. It really is.
Wow.
It's just adds more to the punishment. So friends who think they might be adding some help are really hindering the process.
Yeah.
But good, supportive friends who can put an arm around us and journey with us and grieve with us, cry with us, laugh with us, that's gold.
It's really hard, isn't it? As a friend, you feel like this is a horrific situation. I need to have some answers. I need to have some solutions here. And sometimes I guess you come up with something, anything, and you clutch at straws and, oh, there you go, I've given an answer. But not realizing perhaps that sometimes it's best to say, I don't have an answer. I feel your pain. I feel your confusion. I wish I could fix this, but I can't. All I can do is just, be here with you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Can I share the personal story? My
Sure.
younger brother died, and I was sitting in the hospital with him on his last weekend, and several people called. One friend particularly came in. I'll always remember it. There was a chair beside me, and when he came in the room and he saw my brother there, he said, "This is sad. This is terrible." And he sat down beside me, and on reflection, I think it'd be 15 to 20 minutes. He didn't say a word. Just sat there. It was the most profound experience to have that incredible support. And then someone else came in and stood at the end of the bed and was quite anxious. I don't know what to say. Oh, this is terrible. And he was sort of wringing his hands and anxious. And I found myself feeling a need to support him. His anxiety wasn't comforting at all. So be a non-anxious presence. To be a non-anxious presence in a time of grief. Can I just come back to what you're saying about the faith? Recognising, all diverse faiths who are among our listeners, we highly respect that. I think for the Christian person who does believe in the second coming of Jesus and the texts in Scripture that speak about, the dead in Christ will rise first.
This is what 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, I think.
Where it talks about, those who have died are being raised to life, and the incredible encouragement and warmth that provides a believer where I know my child, my son and daughter has died, but Scripture describes that as a sleep, and in Jesus' time, he will raise them to life again. I remember as a kid, there was this family who lived not far from us, Kent. They were real characters, and I remember the mum must have been upset with the son one evening. The voices carried across the clear night, and she said to a boy, she said, "I hope God has lost your plan because I'd hate to see another one like you." And I always laughed at that. I hope he's lost your kit to make you again. And it was he hasn't lost it. As a Christian believer, he hasn't lost it. He's got the master pattern there, and he can restore and remake somebody new, and a profound comfort and support. And I would encourage any person out there of faith to hold on to that faith. Yes, it'll get kicked. You may have to reshape it a tad, but hang on to that faith and allow it to sustain you and support you and carry on this journey.
No, that's fantastic, Trafford. Now, look, the focus of our chat today is sort of based around an article that appears in this month's Signs of the Times magazine, the July magazine. It's entitled "Still Standing, Growing a Stronger Marriage After Losing a Child" by Victor Parichin. And he goes into, Trafford, in this article, into a number of sort of practical suggestions about, how to go on, how to go on in the first place, and how to perhaps heal from that experience of grief. Can we talk about that?
Sure.
How to cope, how to heal.
Yeah, I think he raises some really neat points. And I think as one of them, he says, accept one another's emotions, which we've touched on a bit, that we all grieve differently, as you said. We love differently, we got different personalities, and we need to accept that and say, hey, my wife is open, she cries a lot. That's draining because as a man, I'm not sure how to best comfort her, but I need to ask her, how can I comfort you? And sometimes just that's a hug, it's a hold. As a man, I might retreat. It's just the way we do it. Let's learn from that. One article I read, Ken, in this issue said, try every day to spend 30 minutes together. At the end of the day, check in with each other, and it'll be very difficult to talk about. Sometimes just hold hands, hug and hold. It might be too painful and hurtful to talk about it, but just simply let each other know, hey, we're on this together, we're going to journey together, we're going to survive this together. And I think that make a commitment to stay together at this time. Research tells us clearly that a married couple will survive long term. Or one of the facets, of course, of a long-term marriage is that commitment to stay together. You make a commitment, we are going to journey together. We're in this for the long haul. And if couples in a moment of grief and loss, at a time of grief and loss, are able to say, we're going to sustain that commitment, they picture this, we're glued, we're stuck together, that's
sure.
it, this is what we desire, and we're going to continue to do what we've done to build that. So we stay connected at the end of each day, we support each other, we keep checking in.
Yeah, and I guess, Trafford, if you've made those traditional marriage vows, for better, for worse, in sickness or in health, then you think, well, boy, when I said for better or for worse, I didn't imagine it would be this bad, but nevertheless, here we are. And it seems that a spouse can actually be, one of the most powerful allies through that grief process. The person who perhaps you're able to be most open with, even if there are times that you just want to be silent. Surely there are other times when you can say, look, there are times when I do need to withdraw. There are times when I don't feel like talking, but it doesn't mean I don't love you. I mean, there does need to be some openness there, doesn't there? And some self-awareness.
So we know we're checking in regularly and saying, hey, this is where I am just now. Yeah, and we know we might be doing the journey a little differently, but we're on the journey together. I think you're right. We know, hey, we're on this journey together. One thing that I think is important, Ken, is to accept moments of happiness.
Yes, because you can feel guilty about that, can't you?
Especially with, when we've lost a child or even a partner. But for a child, we think, I'm not showing respect if I'm happy. I need to sustain this grief and loss and sadness as a way of letting my partner know I really miss them, and a child, I really miss them. And, but I think we need to recognise that there's going to be moments of happiness, and we need to enjoy those as much as we can and grab them and cherish them and recognise that, hey, life is, sun and rain and green and dry and a sunny green spot is to celebrate. So we need to accept happiness and take those small steps where we continue to recognise that, it sounds a bit of a but life does go on. Life does go on, and it's reshaped, reformed in some way, but we do go on. And so all the usual celebrations of life around us need to be cherished. But as maybe you mentioned earlier, Ken, a celebration of a child's birthday, the anniversary when they died, that can be incredibly challenging because it raises all of that grief and loss. So how do we celebrate happiness? It's another birthday when it's, the very child we want to celebrate isn't there.
Yeah.
And that's going to take some good courage, some good ways of how do we deal with this? How do we make this a special time?
Yeah. No, and that's a constant thing, isn't it? Not a constant thing, but it's something that's going to come up. I mean, here's Christmas dinner. We're maybe 2-3 years down the track, but, we're all sitting around the Christmas dinner table, but even if there isn't a physical gap there is an empty space, in a parent's heart, in a sibling's heart where they think, my child should have been sitting right here laughing with us. And what can be some of the happiest times of the year can sometimes be, sad times that sort of bring it all back in a rush.
Yeah. And all normal when all those emotions and all those memories emerge. It's all normal, all understandable. And again, we just need to find a way of, saying, hey, we celebrate his life, we remember, and we do that with honour.
So, Trafford, it's a bit of a cliche, maybe, but I think there's some truth in it. When we're talking about, this particular area of grief, that, people say the person who has died, wouldn't want you to go on miserable for the rest of your life. You're saying sometimes we feel like we're honouring the person who has fallen asleep by remaining sad, whereas in fact it honouring the person properly may actually involve allowing ourselves to be happy, allowing ourselves to enjoy life.
I think you're spot on. I think you're right, Kent. I think to continue in deep grief, we acknowledge the grief, we don't minimise it in a way, but I think each individual at a certain time and over time, I don't think there's, as we said, throw out the timetable, but at a certain period of time, over time, I do think we recognise and accept that this death has occurred, that we've grieved and lost, but we start to be more involved in life generally. We do move on in some way, and I think if we find that difficult and it really is impacting our health and our well-being, our relationships, we do need to maybe get some professional support.
Sure,
and it's a very proper thing to do, to seek some counselling, some therapy, a good advisor, counsellor, say, how do I accept this grief? How do I acknowledge in a real way the loss, but also commence, enjoying life. No, I think you're right, Ken. And again, individually, we'll do that differently, but we do need to make that journey. And I think generally we do that by taking small steps. We don't try and accomplish huge things, but we take small steps and give ourselves permission more and more to celebrate life and all the good things around us.
It's interesting though, Trafford, that sometimes it seems, as we're grieving, we get into this mindset that, I should be over this by now, whether it's an expectation that you've placed on yourself or that you feel other people are placing on you. You feel like, I shouldn't, say the name of my child anymore. I shouldn't talk about that. It'll upset people. People think I'm going on and on about it. But I think the opposite's the case, isn't it? It's great to naturally bring the name of your loved one into conversation. They would have loved this, or tell a story about something they did when they were little that was cute. It doesn't have to be a sad thing. It's just this person and the memory of this person is still a part of our family. It's not about banishing them, is it?
No, and I think you're right. I think if we can find some fun stories, some happy memories, and declare those and share those, and to celebrate those, you're right. Now, sadly, Ken, when and I think the article that you mentioned talks about that, when it's a little baby, there's not a lot to celebrate as far as time,
because there aren't a whole lot of memories.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot of memories. Whereas a child, a teenager, there's a lot of memories. So it's going to be different again, but. We do need to use the child's name. Let's talk about Jenny or Bill or Paul or Sue. Yeah, some people in their desire to think they're comforting, well, tell me about the deceased, or, as you said, they don't talk about it. No, tell me about Jenny.
And other people around, like supporters as well, think, I won't mention it. I don't want to bring that up and make them sad. Whereas in fact, a lot of, bereaved parents actually say, I love it when someone actually brings up the name of my child who's passed away.
I think that's a real honour.
Yeah, that's right. It shows me that they're remembering them too, and it opens the door for me to be able to let a little bit of that out too, and not to feel I have to hold it in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think again, we keep sharing. It'll do different. We do it different. That's okay. But some couples will have a memorial gathering apart from, say, a funeral service. They'll gather all their friends and have a memory of something, and or they'll set up a web page, a scrapbook, where they take photos and do this lovely memorial kind of thing. Others set up a scholarship or a trust or a foundation or a charity. It's fabulous, and I think of some of the well-known Australian families who've lost a loved one, who've done that, and it's become a very familiar thing for a lot of people. I really honour that. Not everybody can do that. That's fine, but we need to find ways of celebrating the child who we've said goodbye to, and as you said, who's sleeping, whether it's a baby or teenager at any age. And when my brother died, Kent, he was 45, and I remember my own mum saying, no mother should ever have to say goodbye to a child, and she felt that grief and loss terribly, as did my dad. So, we're speaking across all ages here, from a little baby in utero right through to an adult who's still a child. Yeah.
Sure. And look, I mean, it is an unthinkable thing, and it's something that we all hope to avoid. But I guess any of us who lives a good long life ourselves is very likely to have to confront this at some point along their life's journey. So as horrific as it is normal in some really sad way. And you've really helped us with some practical tips today, Trafford. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, Kent.
And we should say, of course, that if listening to this episode has brought up some difficult feelings for you, please seek the advice of a trusted support person. Have a chat. Don't just hold it in. And if that's not an option for you, try Lifeline. You can call them on 131114.
Today's episode was based on an article appearing in this month's Signs of the Times magazine. A subscription is just $26 for 11 issues a year. To find out more, visit signsofthetimes.org.au. Signs of the Times has been published in Australia since 1886 and is proudly produced by Adventist Media.
This is an Adventist Media podcast.